She is on it. Good job. Hello, hello, friends, and welcome to the Pieces Collective. We are here at the Wisdom, Wellness, and Wealth monthly series, brought to you, obviously, by the Pieces Collective. My name is Shannon Stott, and I am your host for this evening. And we have so many amazing things to talk about as far as travel and the world and stories. If you want to travel, getting inspired to travel, yes, we have a lot. We have a lot to discuss. If you are joining us, or rather, because you are joining us, tell me where you're joining us from. Let's mentally travel to your location. And I am joining you from Austin, Texas. We have a lot of people joining, obviously, from Maryland. So shout out to you all. And get your fingers ready just to chat with us. Put in the chat where you are joining us from, what you're excited about tonight. Yes, Bell Mapan City. Oh, yes, right. Camry High. Yes, obviously. So good to see you. So good to have everybody here. And as we are getting started, just know that your job is to join in our conversation. We would love to know what you're thinking. We would love to hear your own stories and to also hear your questions for our panelists this evening. So, as we are discussing the Black travel movement, inspiration through the world today, before we get in that conversation, I want to definitely introduce Ikrama Muhammad. It is truly inspiring for us to be gathered together to learn from and be supported by each other today. The Pieces Collective is committed to using creativity to help serve the needs of the community and contribute to the economic, social, and human development of women and youth and young adults. Please welcome Ikrama Muhammad, the Executive Director of the Pieces Collective, to ground our conversation today.
Greetings, Shannon. How are you?
So well, so good to see you, Ikrama. Always fun to be here.
Good to see you as well. And I am happy to be here and anxious to find out about travel and listen to the panel. But the first thing I want to do is congratulate the teams that we had that walked in our 5K on this past weekend, which we refer to now as Juneteenth weekend. And I just want to shout out Team SOAR, the Janice Rose Boppers, the New York Steppers, the Georgia Warriors, Team Strolling, and Team Kiana, and all of the single walkers, which I affectionately refer to as Team TPC. So we want to thank you. This is our third time doing the walk. The first time we walked, Juneteenth was not a federal holiday, but we had done Sunday walks together and decided that we wanted to do something that would inspire our communities to be healthy and open that walk up to anybody in the country or the world who wanted to walk with us. And we thought Juneteenth would be a great day to do it. And then what do you know? The Friday before the walk, Juneteenth became a federal holiday. Now, in spite of the fact that that's not what the people who were protesting and marching and petitioning were asking for. But as with a lot of things, we have to take what people mean for not good and use it for good. So we walked for wellness in our community. We walked to honor our ancestors, and we walked to as a fundraiser for our organization to develop community programs. So I want to give them a real shout out and an applause for their commitment to doing that, and looking forward to seeing the pictures up online. You can go to our Facebook page or our website or our Instagram page in the next few days to see all the pictures. So I heard this quote that said, "It's not that people know too little, it's that so much of what they know just isn't so." And it got me thinking about why we accept so much that isn't true. And could this be the reason that after hundreds of years of struggle, we still find ourselves falling short of the outcomes we desire? One of the biggest keys to gaining knowledge and to growth is accepting the understanding of what we do not know. And that makes sense to me, because when you're doing something new, you don't know how to do it. You might have read some things, but you don't actually know. So you learn from the experience. And once you have the experience, then you know. Another important thing to acknowledge in the quest for knowledge is that what you don't know far outweighs what you know. Of course, there's so much more that we don't know than we know. What we know could fit in a little thimble as to what could be known. And then another thing, and I think maybe the most important, is that what you don't know, is that some of what you think you know is not true. And so we have to be open to new information and observant of new thoughts, and be willing to consider and analyze and evaluate new ideas. Being creative requires this as well. It requires this art, which I call the art of not always knowing. And we're not really comfortable with that all the time. It requires us letting things flow, taking risks, then creating and composing the information and experiences that we have into a format that is beautiful. So I begin to wonder, why are we often so uncomfortable with not knowing, or with being presented with new ideas, or when being presented with something that contradicts what we know, we feel like we want to resist? So my theory is that it goes back to elementary school, when it was important to get the right answer. If you got the right answer, you were rewarded. And if you got the wrong answer, well, you were embarrassed. And many of you may remember a time when the teacher asked a question and you knew the answer, but you were afraid to raise your hand because you had some doubt as to whether or not you were right. And then someone, of course, got called on and gave the answer you were going to give, and you regretted not raising your hand. But on the other hand, you had students who were in the class who thought they knew everything, and you couldn't convince them they were wrong, even in the face of insurmountable evidence. So some of us were like this as children, and some of us are like this today. Being wrong is not rewarded, but it takes courage to be wrong. And it takes a love for truth to accept when you are wrong and change your thinking. To take the risk of being wrong is often the only way to know how to be right. It's called learning. Brilliant scholars, scientists, inventors were wrong many times before they were right. There's no shame in being wrong if you are sincere in your desire to learn and you are willing to correct yourself. So why am I talking about this? It's because there's a saying by a famous scientist that says, we cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them. So we have to learn to think new. We're in a critical space at this time with many problems and challenges that face us. And thus far, we've been using the same strategies and tactics that we've used in the past and have received little, if any, movement toward the desired outcome. Lack of knowledge has us settling because we doubt our ability to be right or to take risks. Although we have been conditioned to color within the lines, we must resist that temptation when it comes to our freedom. When we get distracted or when we acquiesce, then the systems of oppression, racial violence, and poverty persist. We have a long line of ancestors who did not stop at the fear of being wrong. And that is why we have made the strides and the progress that we've made today. So instead of being led by the same ideas that haven't been fruitful for us, we can create a new vision for ourselves by reflecting on the information left by our scholars and ancestors who have gone before us and see where it leads. Don't be afraid to be wrong. Don't be afraid to be corrected. Have the courage to raise your hand. Have the love of self to take collective action based on new ways of thinking that will lead to new ways of being. Our survival is depending on it. So tonight's discussion is one about knowledge of history and culture around the world and how travel connects us and how we shouldn't fear travel. We should welcome it. We're grateful to our panelists for the generosity of their time and the benefit of their knowledge and experience, and we are grateful to you for being here. We hope you enjoy and are inspired to action. Peace and love.
Goodness, I am so excited to know that so many places are being represented here this evening and to get right into it, to start to talk about why we should be traveling. So, we do have the knowledge to move forward and to learn about what is out there beyond our own borders. Let us start this conversation with all of our panelists. So I'm going to introduce our panelists one by one. Our first panelist this evening is Otis L. Lee Jr., Esquire. Otis Lee Jr. is a retired lawyer and a former member of the Pennsylvania and Virginia Bar Associations. Lee is the author of From South Boston to Cambridge, The Making of One Philadelphia Lawyer, published in 2013. The Last Train from Djibouti, published in 2019. Lee is currently awaiting publication of his latest book, I Was Born in the Forest, A Traveler's Guide to Maroon Societies in Brazil, Black Separatists. Oh, you are going to have to tell me how to pronounce these books, Lee. And The Citadel of African Slavery in Portuguese America. Expected publication date is in the fall of 2023. Please welcome Mr. Otis L. Lee Jr., Esquire. How are you, Lee?
Fine. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Oh, my goodness. This is very, very exciting. Thank you for being here, Otis. We also have Jose Neves. Jose is the son of Cape Verdean parents from the island of Santiago. He graduated with a degree in forestry from ISAUTL and a degree in civil protection emergencies in critical neighborhoods from UNI. Jose has promoted the creation of new cultural products associated with the African diaspora, excuse me, which aims to reduce the lack of knowledge in African culture and history on the continental and in the diaspora. Jose now promotes Afro-tourism in Portugal and the NGO Batoto Yetu Portugal concerning history, gastronomy, patronymy, and also promotes a digital mapping of the African presence in Portugal. Please welcome Jose.
Hello,
How are you, Jose?
I'm fine. Thank you for inviting me.
Of course, it's wonderful to have you. Tonight, we also have Karen Freeman. Karen Freeman is the owner of Carefree Travel. As an independent travel consultant, she provides personalized travel advice and assistance to busy people who want to leave their vacation details to an expert. When she is not traveling, she splits her time between her residence in the Outer Banks of North Carolina and with her family in Maryland. Karen Freeman, welcome.
Hi, Shannon.
How
I'm on
are you?
this. I'm on this side of the stage. Usually, I'm
I know
backstage.
it doesn't happen often, but when it does, it's amazing. And we also have Diane Bauer. Diane has been a travel consultant since 2001, right? 2001, and is currently the owner of a North Carolina based franchise with cruise planners offering mostly luxury travel and experiences to Europe, Asia, South America, and Africa. She has visited 89 countries since 2000 and considers herself a pretty well traveled person with three daughters and two grandchildren who have
Yes.
also caught the travel bug. Please welcome Diane.
Thank you, Shannon.
How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for inviting me.
Of course, it's wonderful to have you. All right, friends, panelists, and for those of you who are in the chat, I would love just to start this conversation with this question. So, think if you're in the chat, warm up your fingers and see and think back to a place that had an impact on you. And your question is, what has been something you have learned in your travels that has changed the way you think about the world, and where was it? What has something that you have learned in your travels that has changed the way you think about the world? Anyone want to start us off, panelists?
Well, I'll start us off, Shannon.
Sounds great.
And this is going to lead to my friend Jose, because last year I did a cruise down the West African coast that started in Portugal. And I actually spent some time in Lisbon, and Jose actually took me on some tours. But there was a lot of information there about the Moors, the Africans that ruled over the Iberian coast for both Portugal and Spain. And I think that being American, we barely learn American history. Certainly don't learn too much about the rest of the world, but rarely do you learn about Black people ruling over white people. I don't know if I've ever learned that anywhere else, other than in books, but not in the classroom. And so I think just learning about 500 years of rule there and what that meant, and just the fact that, in Africa, they were ruling themselves, but they also had conquered Spain. So I think that was a little bit profound to just switch that thinking, because you're always thinking about Europeans conquering everybody else
Mhm.
and ruling. And so this was something that left an impression.
Wow, amazing. I'm just assuming Jose is going to take over from there.
Oh my God. Well, thank you. If it was helpful to bring some new information, as the first panelist was saying, um, we also, and myself included, we don't know everything, so we are always learning, and it's a challenge share our knowledge, because we can be confronted with new information. But that's the thrill, to that gives me some motivation to do the work that normal we do here. I don't know if you want me to speak a little bit about that right now, or
And we can definitely just sort of back and forth.
yeah.
Everybody just keep your thoughts on this, things that you
Okay.
have learned that made you change or the way you think about the world. But yeah.
Okay. So for me, for example, my parents migrated from Cape Verde. So Cape Verde is on the west coast of Africa, some small islands, uh, kind of a desert islands. And I made a travel to know there like 20 years ago for the first time. And for me, it was very interesting to see um, the knowledge that the cultural communities had, that I didn't learn here in these books or in the school, and that they could bring together with the technical or scientific information, and make a totally different view from the view that my parents, for example, had, and then we can construct a stronger information to share for the next generations. So going to Cape Verde, going to the interior of Cape Verde is a kind of a maroon place, like in Jamaica or Caribbean islands. So it was very interesting to see that and to learn that, and to try to build a um, stronger story, a stronger culture for us to share with everyone.
Well, I can certainly testify to that. I think one of the most striking things for me was my first trip to Africa, which was then followed by several trips to Africa. But trying to debunk the Western media depiction of Africans and our culture, to me, has been a mission that I've been on, because um, we need to understand that what the Western media is portraying has nothing to do with the reality of what's going on in the world, except in areas where they have a self-interest. So going to Africa is, to me, is essential for every African American that can afford to do so. Um, you at least have to go once, so that you get a chance to see your people, and realizing that you're not in the minority. It's a totally different feeling to realize you're not in the minority for once in your life, and you don't have people walking behind you in retail stores and all that kind of thing. It's a liberating experience. So for me, that was one of the first, how would you say, revelations that really brought home uh, the misperception that we've been fed so much by the Western media. So that was just one of many, but that was very important to me.
Yeah. Diane, yeah.
Yeah, and to feed on what Otis is saying, so the first time I went to Portugal was about 4 or 5 years ago, and I learned so much. I mean, the history is so rich. The African history is just amazing, and I thought I knew so much about Portugal, and I learned a lot because I got sick there, and ended up going to a doctor, a Portuguese doctor, and yeah, it was an amazing experience. If I could have her as my general practitioner, I would. However, on the trip that I met Karen on and Otis on back in November, December, down the west coast of Africa, what he's saying, where you realize you're not the minority, that was a totally different feeling than any other trip I've had. And I've had so many trips since, like, look, pretty much all my life I've been traveling. My parents were travelers. And the warmth, the welcoming, we get off the ship and they're, welcome home. I mean, where else have I been in my life where they say welcome home? If anything, they're like, go back to America, go back to where you came from. Like, well, how do you know I'm from America? You just assume I am when I step off the ship or off the plane. But they were so welcoming, and I never had anyone grab my hand and hug me and, throw their hands around my shoulder and say, welcome home. We're glad you came here. That was a very warm feeling. That changed a lot for me. So I'm already going back. I've planned a couple of trips back already.
It's amazing. I want to jump into right before we started. Everyone's already talking about this, but the study of the culture, right? The studying of different cultures before you go. How much are you doing that to prepare your mind, your emotions, and what you're taking, what you're not taking, obviously, but specifically the culture? How much preparation are you doing before you visit a new place?
Well, I've tried to read and I've, talked to other people, but it's not the same until you get there. And then you learn that, what you've read is not the same as how it really is. So I kind of just take it as it comes, you know. I learned certain things that you can do, you can't do, they shouldn't do, you shouldn't say. But you really don't really know a whole lot until you step foot in that country.
But what I always tried to do, and I used to do this for many years, my wife and I, we started traveling, I would say, together, at least in the middle 70s, and I began my travels in the early part of the 70s. But in the latter years, I always tried to read a brief history of the
Hmm.
place that I was going to, not to become in any way, shape, or form an expert or anything like that, but to at least remove the veil of ignorance about certain basic things about the country. And I always kind of had a game I would play with the tour guides. It's called Stump the Tour Guide. So, so trying to at least get some understanding of the history of the place you're going to makes the travel there so much more rewarding because
Hmm.
you at least have a background about how things got to be to a certain extent. And you don't have to read an exhaustive history or anything like that, but a brief history so that you get an idea about some of the basic historical factors that shape the country that you're going to. I think that that's a part of, um, removing ignorance and not traveling just as a simple tourist. To me,
Yep.
you want to travel to learn. And the only way you learn is by reading and traveling and being able to ask intelligent questions and so forth. So my practice, and I just gave it up recently, uh, was to try to get a brief history of the country and read it and so forth. And Diane, it's very interesting. I had to go to the doctor in Portugal as well.
What
Was she
happened
12?
in
I'm
Portugal?
pretty sure my
You're
doctor looked like
not.
she was 12.
Yeah.
She was a tiny thing.
And it was an experience, but that's all a part of the experience. To
It
be
is.
seen by a doctor in a foreign country
And then
is
I,
Yeah.
great. Now I think
I
that
was
kind of,
excited.
yes, absolutely, it was very interesting. Yeah. So
Okay.
as our host was saying, it's just very important to try to step out and not be afraid, but be informed. Don't operate in a veil of ignorance completely.
Hmm.
Try to get some understanding of where you're going,
Yeah, I
what's
think
about.
when I first started traveling, I was more reading travel books.
Hmm.
Hmm.
And like you said, Diane, you're still not going to really know until you get there. Like in Australia, I was determined to buy a didgeridoo.
What?
And a didgeridoo, the instrument that the
Oh,
indigenous people,
yes.
I was determined to buy that, which I did buy. But one of the things when I went to buy it, and I'm all ready to say, okay, now let me just try to use it. And he tells me, women do not use the didgeridoo. So please do not attempt to use it. So some things you're not going to know about the culture till you actually get there. I still bought the didgeridoo, but I did honor their practice that women don't, blow this
Yes.
instrument. It's only for men. But I bought it and brought it home. Now I try to do more than just the travel books, as Otis was saying, to try to read up on the countries a little bit more. And
Hmm.
I recently was given a gift, the book by Jessica Nabongo, who has visited at 195 countries.
Mm.
It's a Black woman who wrote the book. And so
Yes.
she only has about 65 countries in the book, but she writes a little bit about each country. And of course, it's her experience, but she also tells you about the country as well. So, which is better than the tour book.
Yeah. Well, I'm not a traveler. But I have traveled to some countries, especially in Europe, and I also try to learn as much as possible, even concerning safety issues, because some countries are when the Berlin Wall fell down, so some countries were kind of in a closed mindset.
Mm.
But I'm more of a tourist guy. I don't play the stomp, the tourist guy, but I try to. It's kind of we are traveling without leaving because each group of tourists is different, and we have to be with some focus on what they need or what they want. So it's kind of we do small travels outside when we meet people. So so I try to learn and to hear as much as possible because there's always something new to learn, even from here, from Portugal. I was born here, so it's infinite information to learn.
Mhm. On that sort of note, like specifically on the note of learning and this note of didgeridoos, I'm wondering how can Black travelers respectfully engage with Indigenous communities? And we're honoring their culture, we're honoring our culture, but how do we go about doing that respectfully
That was for me.
for
Anybody?
anyone? Yeah.
Well, I think part of it is, as Oz was saying, first knowing a little bit about the culture, but when
Mhm.
you engage, asking questions and trying to understand whatever it is they want you to know about their culture, and you know, changing any perceptions that you might have by engaging in conversation, sharing a little bit about your culture or things you thought you knew or things you didn't know, and now engaging with them you do. So, um, and being respectful and polite.
Right.
Mhm.
And they're very engaging. Like the ladies we ran into in Namibia, and I
Mm-hmm.
didn't know a thing about them. And I was curious as to why their skin was a red tone and their hair. And they were very engaging in explaining their tribe to me. So if you ask questions and you're genuinely curious, they're very open and honest, and they'll explain, things to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Michelle and I had a great experience when we first went to Brazil. They have in Brazil, in the Afro-Brazilian community, a situation that is entitled the Quilombo, which is the African um, occupation of certain lands, indigenous lands by Africans in
Yeah.
during the period of enslavement. Of course, the Portuguese, as you know, were instrumental in all of that. But we were able to get off the tourist track rather than seeing every little thing that the tour guide wants you to see, taking you to these setup operations for these gifts and so forth. If you try to go to places where the tourists don't go all the time, but still being safe, and you can engage in with the people and ask them about their lives and get some feedback about how life really is, rather than what the traditional tourist track would have you to experience. So for us, we always try to go on what we call cultural tours
Yep.
rather than just a
Yep.
tourist tour. So I tell the travel guide, or I tell the travel vendor, look, I don't want to just do every little thing, go to all the typical places. Let's see if we can get off the beaten track and do something a little bit more engaging that can, help you understand the culture. And then certain tours, for example, we were just in Morocco in November. We were able to have meals, at least half of our meals were shared with the Berbers of Africa.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were able to sit down with them in their homes and have,
Mm-hmm.
and they cooked the meals and served us, and they brought their kids all out. And so, and we had a
Mm-hmm.
lot of cross fertilization discussion. And so that's the kind of engagement I think that you really learn by traveling rather than just going to see all of the typical little tourist attractions and buying the little
The trinkets,
and
yes,
things like
yes.
that they want to sell you, all the setup operations that they have.
Yeah, I
So
agree. Those are
that's
the things
what I
that
like to do.
terrifies my mom. You know, when she sees me having dinner with a family in Myanmar, she's like,
Yes,
"Who are these people? Do you know monks?" I'm like, "No, I don't know monks.
yes, yes, yes,
I
yes,
don't know
yes.
their names. Then we don't speak the same language, but they put
Right,
makeup
right.
on me, and yeah, we
Yeah,
had dinner together. And
that's right. That's
I
right.
like the off the beaten path. I mean, I'm going on a trip next month,
Yes,
35 days, and almost every single excursion I booked was like an off the beaten path excursion. I don't
yes,
want to walk
yes.
to the tourist locations. I don't want to go shopping. I can go shopping here, or I can
Right.
order what I
Absolutely.
want, online or whatever. But I want to
Yes.
see what the locals do. I want to
That's
have dinner
exactly
with
right.
them. I
Yes.
want to
Yes.
go to their homes and visit them, and I want to
Yes.
hear their stories. I want to learn about their families and see the kids, the
Hmm.
grandkids. I
Hmm.
want to pet the
Hmm.
dogs.
That's right.
That's my thing, petting the
That's
dogs.
that's
I think
exactly right. That gives you the most sustaining kind of experience, that you
Hmm.
carry with you for a lifetime, and you get
You
to
learn
know
so much
people.
more, and they
Absolutely.
respect you in a different
Yes.
manner too. Because
Yes.
if you're a tourist, they treat you like a tourist. But when
Hmm.
you
Hmm.
go in and you're acting like you're genuinely interested in their culture
Right.
and their family and how they live their lives, you learn
Hmm.
so much more.
Yes. 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 I certainly
Yeah.
agree. Hmm.
I think it's important for people to know that they can do that too,
Right.
Otis. That depending on if you have a travel agent, can make it easier, but which vendors you're working with,
Is her
and then
name
you can
Karen?
ask for those things. What did you say?
I said, is her travel agent named Karen?
My travel agent is named Karen, yes. But I'm saying people need to know that they can ask for these things because one
Hmm.
of the things when I first started looking at Africa and most of the vendors I found were more interested in the animals than the
Yeah.
people,
Yeah. Right.
right?
Right.
Everything was a safari, safari, the animals,
Yeah,
the
and then you think there were giraffes and tigers running through town, and
right. So, you just need to stand up for what you want to see, what you want to learn, make sure you're
Mhm.
asking for it, make sure it gets arranged. And
Yeah.
sometimes people think they just have to go along with whatever, you know,
Hmm.
Mhm.
was there, but it can be customized to your needs.
That's
Well,
right.
that's
This is
why that's why it's
perfect.
important to do a little bit of reading. You don't have to get into being a scholar or all of that stuff, but in my view, just remove the veil of ignorance so that you know something about the place,
And
and
be
you may
open.
find that
Be
there's something
open.
you really want to explore when you get over there.
Right.
This
Exactly.
is a perfect space to talk about because this, like, as we're talking about getting off the beaten path, I would be interested to know about this Afro tourism aspect that we're talking about. Can we start? Let's go down that path a little bit. Jose.
Jose. Okay. Okay.
Right? We're talking this Afro tourism. This is, I think, a new concept
Yeah.
that people don't know about.
Hmm.
Well, catching these last words, for example, for me, if I have to go to a Western kind of country,
Hmm.
probably the interaction will be a little bit different, or the interests will be different in terms of trying to get in touch with the native culture because we have so much information of it um, that probably maybe if I go to Paris, I will go to the Tour Eiffel, and you know. But if I go to Australia, that I never went, I would be more interested in getting to know the indigenous culture, the native culture. You know, because I feel that there's much more to learn, and what we have from the Afro tourism um, worldwide, especially in Brazil, where we have a lot of tours, also similar to the ones we do, also in other countries. But it's not only a trip. It's connecting ourselves with all this international information about the African diaspora, even in the continent. We have to learn, but also we will teach something when we go there, and we show that we have interest in things that maybe people, the locals, are not interested anymore, because things change. And
Right.
they can be, how come you are interested in this old dance that we don't use it anymore, and you are looking for it. Maybe there is some value on it. So we also, the Afrotourism, I think it's something that can also, we will learn, but we will also share a lot of information. We will share a lot of different knowledge for the ones who are receiving us, wherever they are. And we can go wherever that we will find some story about African diaspora, not only concerned about enslavement period, but we will always have previous stories about Africans in Asia, all around. So we are seeing more and more people of African descent with this possibility, with this privilege to travel, and with this will to travel. And if we look at history, these other waves of it was not tourism at the time, but these other waves of migration from people from Africa. For example, people who were here in Europe fighting in the world wars, Africans.
Mm-hmm.
So when they migrated back to their own countries, they brought a lot of information, a lot of knowledge that was very useful for the countries. And also in the US, that also happened uh, in a different manner. So I think it's very interesting. It is not only uh, entertainment, as we could say in the kind of a Western philosophy, but it's more than that. I think each one of us, when we go, we it's more than that. We want to be there. We will share something. The hugging that were being spoke in the beginning, those huggings, if they are uh, honest and warmed huggings. Of course, some people may want to sell us something, but
No,
but
they weren't trying to sell me anything.
yeah, but it's also, I think it's what we look for. Also,
Right.
and I think that would be very interesting if there was a big wave of Afro people traveling around, being more common all around the world.
Excellent. Yes, as we're talking, we have some videos for everybody actually. So why don't we, to round out what you're talking about and to give us a little sneak peek into what you do, Jose, let's play your video. so fascinating. Yes, I'm so glad we saw this, because this is the thing. At the very end, you're talking about finding out about your ancestry, and I'm wondering for all of you. Uh, I'd love to hear your advice and your knowledge and the things that you've experienced as far as finding out about your ancestry or giving advice for people who are headed out to find out about their own ancestry.
Okay, so we don't go deep in terms of finding, like, for example, family names or something like that.
Mm.
But I've made the DNA test for myself, just for my own interest. But we try to 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 show a little bit to, for example, for people from my generation, we are born from migrants, so African migrants, and the most common things we grow up hearing is kind of going back, people sending us back to other places, and the looking for the ancestry is to help us to understand that we are not here just because our parents migrated recently. We have a long history and past of different African people being here in Portugal, in the Iberian Peninsula, bringing knowledge, bringing. We saw the tables of food and drinking, so the gastronomy is always present, and we were walking on paths where previous African Portuguese people of African descent were living and doing internal migrations. So the region that we saw in the video was a kind of a quilombo here in the south of Portugal. We also had another kind of a quilombo in Lisbon. So until now, they are the only quilombos in Europe, African quilombos. A little bit different from the South American ones because they are not they were not military places, but we try to see that and to show that our ancestry is much longer and it's much richer, and the knowledge doesn't have color as we learn it like today, you know. So when we go to cities, we understand that we are part of it. So the African history is very close to the human history. So, and the knowledge is very close to that history. So cross it to everyone, to all the people, etc. So that's the purpose of looking for the ancestry, to give people a more sense of belonging, and
Mm-hmm.
and they will be more able to achieve better the better of themselves, the better qualities, and not feel uh, ashamed or with the with the roof of development. So
Yeah.
we have to go wherever we want, you know.
Well, I some years ago I did the DNA test, and I had my wife to do the same thing. Uh, but for African Americans, I think this is a very important issue because our history has been cut off and truncated and every kind of way uh, dispersed so that it's difficult to put it together. But talking about Africa, I think it is important if you can find out about where you came from in Africa,
Mm-hmm.
plan a trip around that. It can be very, very illuminating and can be very fulfilling. It's very difficult because, as many of you know, a lot of the data and so forth kind of stops right before the census was uh, started for Black people, and so there's only so far you can go. But then you can do the DNA test and then go beyond that and kind of find the tribe. And I was able to find my people being near Togo, near Kumasi in the southern part of Ghana, and also that was my paternal side, and then my maternal side Yokohama outside of Guinea. So we were able to find that. But unfortunately, when I first went there, I didn't live there until I came back and did the DNA. So um, it's very important, I think, to be able to do that, to try to bridge that gap of knowledge between your present ancestry and the past, to realize that you did come from a rich history of African people who did tremendous things, and that our history actually transcends European history. But you would never know that unless you read something about your African history
That's
and
right.
get beyond what the media would have you believe about yourself and your people. So that's been a mission of mine, has been to debunk as much as I could in my own individual capacity these myths and stereotypes about Africans and African people and about our people. So that's why I travel part of the time.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm wondering if you all can talk about uh, lesser known spaces, like lesser known spaces, artifacts, places to go and visit. You know, people are always traveling to the Eiffel Tower, traveling to the Leaning Tower of Pisa, traveling to these places that are very European centric. But are there places that you all have visited that have heritage, the African heritage, that people don't know about?
Well, I'll chime in on that because I have been doing a study on the Colombos in Brazil, and it's been a 5-year journey. But that was a concept in African history that I didn't know anything about. Uh, and I didn't know anything about it when I first went to Brazil, except, as I said earlier, I went on a cultural tour, and the cultural tour included going to a Colombo, and I had never even heard the term. But I since got myself educated about it, and it's just amazing to know that Africans, especially from Central Africa and Angola, were able to break away from the European domination, the Portuguese and the Dutch, and to build their own communities. They were slave communities, and those people are fighting today to hang on to that land uh, and to get their rights emancipated in Brazil. So that was, to me, uh, a tremendous education, an aspect of African history that I knew nothing about. But the scholars and the African scholars, they know about it. But us lay people, we didn't know. And so that was a tremendous eye-opening experience to understand that we not only resisted slavery, we fought them. And in many instances, we prevailed for a very, very long time. And we just have a rich history if we can only, learn about it and explore it. It's a great thing. So that was a real eye opener for me in, in the Brazilian context.
Recommend it.
Yeah. And
So
I
I
certainly
have,
would recommend that African Americans visit Colombos because it's kind of like the Indian reservation system in America. And they have that for Black people in Brazil, and they're fighting to hold on to that land and to save their culture. That's what they're fighting to do, to save their culture, to get away from European cultural domination. So it's a tremendous story. So I would encourage uh, those of you that are interested in that kind of African history to look into it. It's a tremendous story, tremendous story.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Karen, you would?
I haven't been to these places, but I'm researching now because I want to do a trip to Colombia and South America to explore the African history there.
Yes, yes,
Um, and so I'm working on that, so studying. And also in Mexico,
yes.
because there are parts of Mexico where they have large African
Mhm.
descendants, a large number of African descendants
Yes,
there.
Right.
And you never really hear about that.
Mhm.
So I'd like to go to both of those places with that in mind.
yeah.
Uh,
There's a whole tribe of African Mexicans, and well, a few places in Mexico, but we ran into them in Acapulco,
Mhm. Mhm.
and it's. I talked to a few of the locals, and they said it's almost like being in a whole different world. can't get good jobs. You know, they're discriminated against. They're treated like low class citizens. And some of them are leaving and going to Africa because otherwise they live like they can't live decent lives. They can't get jobs.
Yeah, I read about that. I was surprised to hear that African Americans in Mexico were considered the lowest caste among the Mexicans,
They
and
are. They
very,
are.
very much discriminated against. I
And
didn't know
there
that.
are other tribes too on the west coast of Mexico,
Mm-hmm.
and they're treated the same way.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to talk, love to have you all talk about just safety in general, right? There's this idea as we're, you know, as soon as people hear Africa, Mexico, these there's a feeling that comes up that these places are unsafe. So can you talk about just safety, traveling safe, the mindset of travel, and what people should, how they should travel, and then what they should be really thinking about when they're going to new places?
But personally, when I go to Mexico or, you know, recently to Africa, honestly, as far as safety, I I treat it I treat it the same as I did any other country I go to, Germany or France or Spain. I'm always really, really careful. I've never been pickpocketed. I'm I'm hugging my purse all the time. They're gonna have to attack me and beat me up, and we're gonna have a fight for sure. And I understand the safety concerns, and you know, I'm not even less concerned when I go to Portugal, being one of the top safest countries in the world, than I am when I'm going to Gambia, Ghana. I mean, it's the same for me because it's, you know, safety is always a top concern for me. Traveling alone or, you know, with a traveling companion, I'm always the same, high alert all the time, high alert. And when I'm walking my dogs outside, I'm high alert. It's the same all the time. But you do have to watch. You know, you have to watch your bags. You can't take your eyes off of anything.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter where you are, really. It's just some countries are more prone to pickpockets or robberies than others, but you still need to keep your guard up regardless of where you go.
So you can check the State Department's website, but to me, it seems like they have every country in
Every country's at high
orange,
alert.
at least.
Do not travel. Do not travel.
Right. I think we get used to the difficulties where we are. I mean,
Hmm.
the United States have a very high crime rate compared to these other countries, but then we're afraid to go to these other countries. And like when you could just go downtown and, you know, be
Yeah.
in real trouble here in the United States. So I say you could check the State Department. I think what Diane is saying in terms of, you know, just keep yourself safe, do smart things. You know, if you have a companion or someone to go with when you're there, great. If you're by yourself, just make sure you've checked things out before you take off in the wrong direction.
And I've had tour guides who've acted like bodyguards. You know, I was in Guatemala. We had a driver and a guide, and the driver had a gun. And I'm like, you know, he's got a gun. But, you know, he needed a gun just to keep us safe. It was my mom, my kids, and they were teenagers at the time. And one of my older clients who was like 90 years old. So, you know, we're driving for like 12 hours into Antigua, and the driver, you know, had to stop like every 10 or 15 minutes to check in with the checkpoints, and they made sure that his gun was working and that, you know, he would be able to protect us if needed. And we had no concerns because we knew we had him, and we felt safe. We felt totally safe. Now, you know, but those are the things that drive my mom crazy, you know.
Yeah, the fact that you had to travel with somebody with a gun.
I mean, that's a gun, but it was like one of those big AK-47s.
But I will say also, you know, the places are large. Like we went to Turkey and I was traveling with someone and the State Department said they were having some skirmish and she wasn't sure she wanted to go. And when we talked to people there, they were like, oh, that's over, you know, so many hundreds of miles away on that border. And it's only in this town.
Yeah.
So I said, okay. So it's like saying, you know, I'll pick on Chicago since everybody picks on Chicago.
Yeah, you're going to Miami and it's happening in Chicago. Or even if it's happening in the same city, doesn't mean it's going to be happening on the block that you're going to be on at that very moment.
Exactly.
I mean, you know, we're having things here all the time too. You know, like in a neighboring community, we have one murder here every 10 years, and we had a murder 2 weeks ago. You know, I could walk downstairs in my staircase and, you know, gotten shot like this guy did.
Yeah.
Right.
But it's a chance you take anywhere you go. At home, when you're traveling, and you can't stay in this bubble. You can't live in this shell.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I always do is I never travel without travel insurance. It's an extra premium, and one of my good friends
It's part of the budget.
uh, surprised me that he went on one of the trips with us, and he didn't buy any travel insurance. So it's an extra cost, but um, you know, those costs will pale in insignificance if you get sick over there
That's
Yes.
right.
or you run into some difficulty. When we were in Cappadocia in Turkey, Michelle got sick in Nevershire, and I had to put her in the hospital for half a day. But I wasn't concerned about it because we had travel insurance.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, in one of our trips, our bags got lost for a week, and we had to wear what we had on for about a week. And as we went to different tours, we had to detour off of the tour and run to a department store and get some clothes and
Yes,
stuff.
done that.
So, you know, it's an extra expense, and I know that, and it costs. But I would rather be safe than sorry, because you can never tell. And the older you are, you know, the more you need to think about these things, because you could get sick. And of course now, and Diane and Karen are the travel professionals, but you know, they've got COVID protections now that they've added to these policies.
Yeah.
So I never travel overseas without travel insurance.
Right.
I made claims. I remember one time we were going to Paris, and we were planning on going, and then that tourism thing happened over there, and they shot up a lot of people and so forth. The trip was all set and everything, but the State Department put out a tourist alert, and
And you recovered.
and the policy of insurance said that if the State Department says it's a terrorist threat, then the insurance company would honor that, and you would then be able to get all of your money back. So we got all of our money back, and so we were not out of pocket for anything other than the insurance premium. But that's just,
And I was actually coming back from Paris when that happened.
yeah.
Yeah. And when my plane landed, I had like 40 something text messages and voicemails. Are you okay? Are you okay? I'm like,
Yeah,
yeah, I'm
right.
fine. Why? What happened? You know?
Yeah.
Diane, you have so many stories.
I have a story for
Traveling with
everything.
AK-47s and whatnot. Let's go ahead and take a sneak peek into your video so that we can feel like we're on Diane's travel. Lovely. It's good to know that you're having a good time out there and that everyone's
Life is
having a good
good.
time out there. It's so good. It's so good. Friends, so I am wondering about just this lots of different things, but I'm wondering about specific resources or databases available to help Black travelers trace their genealogy and plan trips. And really, yes to the genealogy, but resources for Black travelers in general. Are you all finding that there's an uptick in helping Black travelers specifically?
I think so. A lot of my suppliers are now reaching out to me and other Black travel agents to set up special groups or special trips. Karen and I are very familiar with the one that a river cruise company has set up. They have several trips coming up, and Karen's taking it. Unfortunately, I had to cancel, but they're doing like soulful Epicurean trips, you know, through the south of France, for example, or Egypt for next year, for example. But I think, as they hire more African American employees that have influence, they're becoming more aware that we do have money and we do travel, and they want to be a part of that. So
Exactly.
yeah, they're
Yeah.
reaching out directly to African American travel agents and some of their employees to help set this up. I just had a retirement community reach out to me today and ask me if I can come over and do like a cruise night for a river cruise company. And they have a good mix of different folks there, but I get the feeling that she was particularly asking about Black travel.
Mhm.
So yeah, I mean, we can do it. We sometimes, we have to branch out further than the Carnival cruises to the Bahamas.
Mm-hmm.
The sacrifices I made. I took my first cruise to the Bahamas, took the kids on a cruise, and I said, never again. We can do better. That was great, and it was a good first time cruise. But there's so much more out there, and my kids can tell you, they've been to probably 30, 40 countries themselves now, and I take turns traveling with them, usually one at a time. But they're older girls and they have their own things going on now. But yeah, they love to travel too, and you have to branch out further. Sometimes it takes sacrifices. Maybe you shouldn't buy that new car. Take some of that money and put it towards, for me, travel. I didn't buy a new car for 13 years. I put my money towards travel.
I'd
Well, I
love
think
for
it's
all of you to talk about you said put your money towards travel. Talk about the mentality shift that you have to one go through yourself, and then the other thing, help others get over. And when I think about this question, I think about my own parents who went directly from Montgomery, Alabama. They joined the Foreign Service and they traveled to Lagos, Nigeria. And my father's parents were like, no, you will do no such thing. Like, you need to stay here
Well,
in
it's
the
like
United States.
education. For
Who
me,
knows?
it's educational.
There
You
it is.
can take that money and put it towards something materialistic, or put it towards something that's educational.
Mhm.
That's how I look at it. I mean, there are a lot of things I give up to travel. My friends want to go out and go shopping. I'm like, well, no, because I have this trip coming up to Japan. I really want to fly business class. And
What is the name of your company? Did it have Diva in the name, I believe?
and divas don't fly in the back of the plane.
That's right. Diva on the back of the plane.
Very good.
Well, I think it just comes down to how you want to spend your time and your money. I mean,
That's right.
it's a values thing.
Yeah.
I've always looked at travel kind of as a postgraduate education. You have to invest in yourself. I
Sure
mean,
do.
you want to broaden your perspectives. You want to understand how this world got to be the way it is. You want to get behind some of these stereotypes and these other kinds of things. So you have to invest in yourself. And to
That's
me,
right.
and in our family, traveling has just been a value
Yeah,
that we've invested in
that's right.
because it's investing in you and helping you to learn about the world that you live in. So, how do you want to spend? What do you want to spend your money on? I see Spike Lee sitting on the right on the court for the Knicks all the time. I said to my wife, I said, well, that's how he wants to invest his money.
That's
So,
right. That's him.
it's what you want to spend your time and your money on. It's a values thing. That's my
Yeah, and your
That's right.
priorities. I did have a friend ask me, she was saying, what do you do to honor yourself? And I said, I travel.
Travel.
right.
That's what I do to honor myself.
I know I have people all the time who've asked me, what do you do in your spare time? Travel. Or at least planning to travel.
Right.
That's right. That's right. Can you all talk about this? Like, we're talking about the happy side, that we're traveling, we're educating ourselves, we're connecting with our culture, we're connecting with the world, we're really figuring out what lies beyond our own borders. I'd love to hear you talk about the emotional toll it takes when we travel, especially to learn about our heritage, and we find what is true. We find the slavery, we find abuse, we
Oh,
find hard things. Can you talk about the emotional toll and how we move through that toll?
Well, I will say there is an emotional toll.
mm-hmm,
On this cruise that we did down the coast of Africa, one day, if you're on a cruise ship and you're in the gym, they always have all the glass, windows to look out. And I
mm-hmm,
was just looking out at the vastness of that ocean, thinking about our ancestors
yeah,
chained at the bottom of those ships coming across the
mm-hmm,
Atlantic. And it was really emotional for me, just to think about what they went through. We hadn't even, I don't think, visited yet the slave castles in Ghana. This was just looking at the water
mm-hmm,
and knowing that,
mm-hmm,
they were at the bottom of the ships. Some of them had thrown themselves over if they
Mhm.
could, those kinds
Mhm.
of things. And so,
yeah,
you just go through it and then reflect on it. And then, hopefully it motivates you to honor what they had to go through in what you're doing here today.
exactly. Yeah, it is very emotional. There's some things I still can't bring myself to go to visit, to see because of the emotional toll. So I have so much more that I want to see, but I have to do it a little bit at a time because it's very hard. It's very, very hard. Like Karen says, you just think about what they went through. They did it all for us. They didn't know it, you know, but they did.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah,
this is yes.
yeah. I was thinking on a story.
Okay.
Cape Verde,
Sure.
Cape Verdean culture is it's a country that people have to migrate a lot because of the drought climate, some poverty, and we have family all around the world, kind of. So we have very strong communities in the U.S., in New Jersey, New York, Providence, in France, Portugal, Spain, Italy, Luxembourg, Switzerland, Senegal, Angola, and when there is a sad time, when there is someone has passed away, and we visit ourselves and we travel, people travel, and I had to make a travel some 3 years ago, and I met some people, some older people that knew my parents, and they were looking at me and looking at me as someone close, but I didn't knew them, but they kind of knew me, and they were like, "Oh, you cannot do the same that we did, because we were working like 24 hours a day and traveling all around, because people would it's very normal to travel all around, but not with that conscious of doing tourism." And those older people were like, the new generation have to bring this knowledge and this network that we have all around the world, and enjoy more of the world. You have to get more pleasure from the world, and
Mm.
don't do the
That's
same
right.
mistakes that we have done, because not that they wanted to do that, but it was the conditions. And I was like really feeling like threatened, because it was just in a high town, like you have to travel. And it was
That's right.
very, yeah, it was very interesting to learn that, and to see the possibilities that we have now, and to take advantage of that, and to pass in much better conditions for the next one. And because things are going really fast, and all
Hmm.
these international networks, the social networks, they can increase a lot. I'm receiving a lot of people who say, "Oh, I saw some videos in TikTok from Portugal, so I decided to go to Lisbon." And I'm like, "Well, how come?" So it's really the different things that can enthusiasm
Mm-hmm.
different people to visit and to travel, It's I think it's a great opportunity. And in terms of the safety that we were speaking back in a while, um, I think we, as Diane said, we have to be always alert. But at the same time, then we can be alert and then go to a place that is a very safe place. Then we will see that it's a safe place. But also, as a group, we have a group of traditional African dances. So we have been traveling to rural villages in Senegal or in Cape Verde, etc., and or in Angola. And whenever we go there, there is always some European or some Portuguese people without any afraid of the security measures. And so I think it's we have to 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 take that in account also, because the information about the security most of the time it's exaggerated information, and we will always, with the right information, we will always get to the place with safety, with a network of people that will take care of us. So I think that's always possible, uh, even though we can carry AK-47, but it's possible.
I want to take this moment as we're talking about people who are caring for us. We can watch Karen's video, Care Travel.
Yeah.
segue. We're segueing. Let's watch your video, Karen.
Okay.
Excellent and amazing. Nice. Oh my goodness. It's Karen was so excited about her own video. She decided
Well,
there she is.
I'm not sure if it's the weather here in the Outer Banks, but my internet is really going crazy tonight. So I keep freezing. But those pictures were from the trip down the west coast of Africa.
And that was just an amazing adventure. You know, I wasn't going to take that trip. I booked it actually in 2017. And then COVID, I was going to take it in 2020. And then COVID happened, and you know that just kept getting pushed back. So I decided to take it. And the day before the payment was due, I said, "I'm not going to go. I'm going to cancel the trip." And then, obviously, I didn't cancel the trip, but
which is a good thing, because not only was it great seeing the countries, but the people that we met. And I think
the people that we met. I mean, that was amazing.
Yeah, it was
amazing.
It was
the group that we formed.
And that one cruise line I had been on quite a few times, 9, 10, 11, 12 times. And I had only seen maybe one of us on those ships ever over the years. And then I see 22 people that look like me.
Yeah, right.
And I had gone on that trip solo because before the pandemic, a friend was supposed to come, but then it got canceled for the pandemic. So I went by myself. I didn't know what to expect, but I'm so happy because the group was so great that we formed.
Yes.
Yeah. We
Right.
won't ever get that again unless we all go together again.
Yes.
Trying to get our reunion cruise
Yes.
going.
Yes. Absolutely.
Amazing. A reunion cruise would be lovely. But make sure you take us with you. Like just do
Yeah.
Pieces Collective like this on the cruise so we can see what you're going through.
Yeah.
I'll add to it.
Right.
Absolutely.
Jose, we had a comment that Ikrama wants to hear more about your book and talking about
It
defining
was
it for
Otis.
us. Hmm?
It was for Otis.
Oh yeah.
Oh, for Otis. Excuse
Yeah.
me, for Otis. But talking about your upcoming books and specifically this book about maroons.
Yes, yes, yes. Well, as I mentioned to you before, when we first went to Brazil, we were exposed to the Colombo. It's a Colombo outside of Rio. It's in an area called Paraty. It's a beautiful community.
I thought that was
Um,
parity. Thank you for telling
Paraty,
me
yeah,
that.
yeah,
No, I don't know how to pronounce it. I make up everything. Parity.
Paraty, yeah.
Thank you.
So the Colombo there was established, after slavery ended, and we had such a lovely time with the folks there. It was just amazing, and we were able to engage with them and so forth, and learn about this concept of Africans owning land in Brazil and claiming it and trying to hold on to their history. This was just amazing. So um, years later, I decided that I would, educate myself more, and I decided to write about it. And I did the research over 5 or 6 years, finished the book a couple months ago. It's now will be published in the fall. But basically, the idea is that Black people from Africa fought against the Europeans, and the elites from Congo broke away from slavery and went into the mountains in Brazil and established their communities. And one of those communities is called Palmares, and it lasted for over 80 years. And Palmares defeated the Dutch, they defeated the Portuguese, and of course, finally they succumbed to the Portuguese and were defeated. But they established their own communities for almost 80 years. And some of the things that they were able to do is just miraculous. They set up an African continent in Brazil. And that's what the Europeans were so afraid of, that the Africans would come into the Americas and establish an African republic. And they came as close to it as anybody could have. And it's just a fascinating story. The main characters of the Colombo of Palmares, Zumbi, who was a martyred leader who led them until he was killed. Ganga Zuma, the leader who led it for such a long time. And all of these Africans were from an imperial tribe in Angola. They were the king's people in Angola. They were the rulers of Angola prior to Angolan colonization. And so when they were captured by the Portuguese and shipped off to Brazil, these people did not accept slavery. They didn't accept being enslaved. They were too good for that. And so they broke away and formed their own community. So it's a fascinating aspect of African history. And it really teaches us a lot about ourselves and how we were able to stand up against this thing. And surprisingly enough, it turns out through the research that I discovered that Africans came to North America well before 1619. They came around between the period of 1526 and 1529 down in South Carolina. So, and then in America, the Africans formed what were Colombo's maroon societies in America. And so, this whole thing of Africans fighting for their freedom and fighting against slavery and going out and establishing their communities is rooted in our history for a long time. So to make a long story short, our brothers from Africa have been fighting this battle a long time, and they have done tremendous things. And Brazil is just a lovely place to learn about African history because they're closer to Africa than we are in North America. And so the Colombo stands as a concept of freedom, perseverance, the ability to hold fast to African values. And so it's a fascinating concept. And it's going on in real time, even today, and they're fighting to hold on to their land. So we were exposed to it, and I was fascinated, and I decided to write a book about it. So I'm going back, hopefully next year in November, and present the book to the Colombo, the group there. It's called the Campino Independencia, which is right outside of Paraty. I contacted my guide who took us around. He's now a pilot over in England somewhere, and he's going to try to help me reconstitute this trip in November. So a fascinating story about our history, and it just shows you that we as a people have so much to be proud of. We've been a glorious people throughout time, and to just accept the European version, the Western version of who we are, you're doing yourself a grave disservice, and you really selling yourself so short because our history is so rich. So that's what that book is all about, and I'll save it for later, so in case when it comes out, you'll buy a copy.
I'll buy a copy.
I want to go on the trip.
Yes. Hey, and by the way, Alvin, during the pandemic, he and Joyce and Bill, they went on one of the cruises right almost during the time, and he told me he was going to Paraty, and Alvin is a friend that we traveled with. And so I told him, I said, well, Alvin, you got to go to the Colombo outside of Paraty. And he called me, well, what is that? You never heard of it. I said, well, just get on over there, get a cab and let him take you there. And he went and he enjoyed it. And he wants to join us when we go back in November to expand on it.
Now, I've been there. I knew nothing about Colombo. Nothing.
Yes,
Never heard anything about it.
Yes. Well, it's a fascinating story. It's so rich. I can't get into it here so much,
right.
But believe me, these
it
people
could be a reunion.
That's right. Field trip. Field trip.
Tell us the name of the book again, Otis, so people can know and be waiting for it with bated breath.
Okay. All right. Okay. Let's see. It's called The Colombos, The Citadel of African Resistance to Slavery in the Americas.
My computer.
And
Maybe we can see.
The subtitle is I Was Born in the Forest.
Maybe we can see a little bit about what was inspiring to you in your video. Huh?
Oh, okay. All right.
Excellent. It's so good to see I just want to just bring some attention to some people in the chat. Dolores saying this is inspiring and has subdued some of her concerns, and that she has a friend that is inviting her to Ghana. And she's, because of this conversation, has been inspired to maybe go. We say go,
Go,
go.
go.
I we also have Mary, who we were all talking about just the emotional toll, and she says, "I find the emotional toll empowering," which is very, yes. I understand that there is some power that comes with the connection to some just the emotions that happen when we're going overseas and when we're traveling in general. We have just lots of people who are just agreeing. And Mary also says travel has opened her eyes to different perspectives, which is wonderful. We at different perspectives and thought processes. And her wanderlust has begun with curiosity of people who look like her. So it's just amazing to see, one, that people's curiosities are being piqued because of your conversation, and that people are really taking to travel in general. It is an up and coming thing that is happening. And I'm wondering if you all could talk, we're starting to wind down here, but if you could all talk about specific cultural preservation efforts or heritage restoration projects that Black travelers can support through their visits and through tourism activities. Anyone? Anyone? Things
So I'm going to put Jose on the spot. Do you have? I don't have any restoration efforts, but
Yeah,
you
right.
do some work with the digital mapping and restoration of the history in Portugal. So maybe you could speak a little bit about that.
Yes. So from what we have learned, we try to work always with some historians, some academics, so that the information that we are passing were not something that people would try to devalue. So we also promoted some books about the, I don't know if you can see well, but about the African presence here in Portugal. And as time was passing, we were receiving also a lot of more information from other periods. And people always ask us, where is that information? Where can I get that information? So we had a project concerning a platform where we will try to put the whole information that we can gather related with the African presence here in Portugal, Iberian Peninsula. So it's a digital African platform, digital African memory, if you can say like that. Because also in the digital world, our footprint is very small, and we don't know in 10 years or in 20 years if we don't put it here, maybe the books will disappear, and then we don't have anything again about African culture, and we will lose it. So we're just trying to be on all ways possible. So verbally, on the books, and with this platform where we try to have this information accessible for schools, for tourists, for academics. We will do an archaeologic excavation. Better, we will not do an excavation. We will be with some archaeologists that will do an excavation in the south, in Alentejo, in the south of Portugal, where there is a kind of a quilombo there. So they will do for the first time an excavation, and we will be taking people there. So this is the kind of work we. Sometimes it's interesting to see that it's an NGO doing this, but at the same time, it's too much effort, and we would like that the entities of with power here in Portugal would be more focused and um, with more desire to put these things going. And I think that this example that I'm saying here for Portugal, it's the same or similar with what we have in Brazil or in the US or in France. All these efforts that individuals have to do to put this world history on the map, because this is not only for African people, it's for
Mm,
everyone.
right.
And so this is our small drop of contribution.
So one thing that Jose reminded me, he mentioned excavation, and um, I'm going on the Ama Waterways Soulful Epicurean cruise to Egypt next year. But there's a gentleman in the United States in the Washington, D.C. area named Anthony Browder, who
Yes.
is an Egyptologist, and he's made many trips to Egypt. And he's, I think, the only Black funded excavation in Egypt. So um, he's definitely doing preservation work there. And he has his own trips, but I'm also sending his information to AMA to see if he could be one of our guest speakers so that we have, don't get a whitewashed version of Egypt, that we get the
Yep.
true version of
Absolutely.
Egypt
Absolutely.
on the trip.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Friends and family and fellow travelers, we are wrapping up our time together, and as we do so, I'd love to hear from each of you just advice, words of wisdom for our people in the chat who are just they're just right on the cusp. They're just like, maybe I'll go somewhere. Maybe, just maybe. And what do you have to say to them?
So I'll start because, as you can see, everyone here is very enthusiastic about traveling, and we've learned a lot, and it's meant a lot to us. I just want people to know that, it's not all Instagram and, YOLO kind of travel. There's an opportunity to travel on any budget. It doesn't have to be over the top and, so glamorous. Unless that's your budget. But you can travel and get started at any rate, and we can put together a trip that you will enjoy and that you'll learn a lot from. So don't be afraid of traveling because of the money. Set your
Yeah.
priorities, like Diane said, save for it so you can have your dream vacation.
Yeah.
Well, I would say that we ought to remember that we talk about the door of no return. One thing about my travels in Africa, I've discovered there were many doors of no return. It's not just one door of no return. So, traveling again is a values thing. It's how you want to spend your money, what's important to you, whether you want to self-educate, you want to get beyond the pablum that we're fed all the time in the Western media, and understand how this world works. And the only way you're going to do that is to do the reading and do some traveling and get yourself exposed to what's really going on in the world. You can form what most people call a worldview. And the only way you're going to get a worldview is to see some of the world and
That's right.
engage with other cultures and other people and enjoy all of the beauty of the world. It's important.
Jose, Diane.
Well, yes. I would say come to Portugal. It's
I was going to go to Portugal too.
Great. That's great. That's great.
Yeah.
Just go to Portugal. Perfect.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
We have great food.
Yes,
We have a lot of history.
Yes.
It's very near. It's not a very far away trip, and it's accessible. From here, you can go to the other European countries. You can go to
Yes.
a lot of African countries that normally people don't know a lot. Guinea-Bissau or Cape Verde or Angola. The Portuguese-speaking countries, and there is a lot of diversity there and here because of those communities, and also this big connection with Brazil. So I was hearing the information from Odis, and we have a really strong bond with Brazilians
Mhm.
here, and so here we have a little bit of all of that. So come here. It's good weather. So
It's great weather.
It is good weather.
Beautiful.
Yes.
It's excellent.
Let me
Yeah.
just make one point before I close out. Jose, a friend of ours, Alvin and Lydia, and Karen and Diane met them. Foster. We went down to the Algarve for 2 nights, and it was a fascinating trip down to the southern part of Portugal because it was in the Algarve that the first Africans were actually brought to Europe.
yeah,
And a lot of people don't understand that this is where it started. Africans were first brought to Europe down in the Algarve, and it was
yes,
just fascinating to go down there. And we went down there to the museum that you have down there.
hmm
I was a little disappointed in the scope of the museum, but I'm glad that they
yes.
were doing something.
It was a big war to make it make that museum go up.
Yeah, you need to invest in that museum, that's for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
But the principle of the thing, to go down there and actually be at the beginning of this whole thing, was just fascinating. So I would say I personally want to get back to Portugal because
Yes.
you
Yeah.
got great wine for one thing, and I love it.
Oh, oh, and those little custards. Those little custards. What they
Yeah,
call that?
that's right. Yeah, those
Yeah.
custards. Yeah,
It's
that's
like
right.
5 pounds in each custard.
Yeah.
And, those little things.
The sweet cake,
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Yeah,
pastel de nata.
Yeah, that's it. Yes. Whatever they. Yes, that's it. They are absolutely
what's the name of it?
delicious.
What was it?
It's pastel de nata, and
Pastel nata.
we
Okay.
have one of the greatest bakery
Mhm.
in Europe and even in South because of the strong presence of the sugar from the sugar canes. From
Okay.
so though all of those cakes have this story behind.
Oh, they're
Yeah.
delicious.
Yes,
Yeah, yeah,
it can
Diane,
only
what have
eat
you
like
got?
1, 2.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. What have
See,
you got for
everybody
us,
can't
Diane?
travel like Karen travels. She travels big time. She's got the big suites and all that sort of thing.
Not every
Yeah,
time.
that's the way to go. Oh yeah.
Yeah, the
I was
diva
surprised
has
she had a
that.
sweet. I'm like, oh, you have a sweet. I have a sweet too. Wow. I say that because people think bad of you when you say you have a sweet. So when she said she had one, I'm like, oh, thank goodness somebody else does.
Any parting words, Diane, for the people?
If you can, just go. Pick a place. It doesn't have to be in Africa. Portugal is a great start. Even France. I mean, if you just want to learn something, if you can't get all the way to Africa, I mean, I was really sorry I didn't go there sooner because there was so much to learn. So now, like I said, I have a couple more trips planned to go back. I don't know if I'll ever catch up, but I wish I hadn't spent so much time going to other places. Not that they didn't matter, but Africa meant so much more,
Right.
and I learned so much more. So yeah, if you can go, just go. I mean, the warmth, the love, the feeling of belonging you can't explain it until you experienced it.
Perfect. All right, friends and world travelers and little travelers, like just, travel a little bit and warm up to it. We want to thank you so much for joining us. This is what we do. We're happy to inspire, to be with you. Thank you in the chat for being here, being inspired, engaging with us, being here for the Black Travel Movement, Inspiration Through World Travel, with the Wisdom, Wellness, and Wealth event provided for you by the Pieces Collective. If you are enjoying this, which you are, I can feel it. I can just feel it. Please come to our next event, which will be on July 19th, 2023. Momentum Matters, elevating your journey to success. And as we reach the halfway mark of this year, you'll be joining us for an invigorating check-in event that will reignite your motivation and keep you firmly on track toward your end of your year goals. So please join us in our next one. I want to say thank you so very much to all of you, the panelists who have made this conversation possible. You've done so much in your world travels and shared so much with us so that we can be inspired. So thank you very, very much. Thank you to Akrama Muhammad, Karen Freeman for gathering us together through Pieces Collective. And from all of us and all of you, good night. We'll see you next time.